Hello and welcome to Superhero Time and Introduction to Tokusatsu. Can everyone see the slideshow okay? Yep. Awesome. Just to double check, everyone can hear me just fine? Better to ask that now than 5 minutes in.
Your audio sounds great.
Amazing. Okay, so let's get started. I'll start off by introducing myself. I am C-chan. I started watching Tokusatsu, a little over 10 years ago now. The first Toku I watched as it aired was, as you may be able to guess from the outfit, Tokuger, which was almost exactly 10 years ago. It started in February 2014. So I've been watching this almost weekly for a decade now, which is a very scary thought. And for those of you who are in the know, yes, that means I also started watching live in the middle of Kamen Rider Gaim. I do not recommend starting watching Kamen Rider Gaim in the middle. It's a bit of a trip. That said, we're here to talk about Tokusatsu as a whole. So I'll give you a bit of an introduction to what Toku is for those of you who are not familiar. I'm going to do a little capsule history of the genre and some of the key figures within it. And then we'll talk about a couple major shows, major franchises, and also from there, a couple hidden gems, some things that you might be able to use to get into Toku if you haven't watched anything so far, and some suggestions on where to go. So let's begin. So what is Toku anyway? Well, Tokusatsu literally means special effects. And in general, this refers to science fiction television shows or movies with a heavy focus on practical effects rather than CGI. So, for instance, this may make you think of childhood favorites such as Power Rangers, or where they got a lot of their footage from, Super Sentai, or Daikaiju movies like Godzilla, or if you're into watching the latest movies, the Shin series might also be something that you think about. However, you could very much apply this to Western shows as well. For example, Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate, and pretty much anything else that involves star in the title, besides Star Search, or takes place in the stars, probably qualifies. And not only does Doctor Who qualify, but also it has a very similar timeline to Kamen Rider, which means you can have some very fun times asking someone if they prefer Heisei Who or Showa Who, or what they think about Reiwa Who, because again, just very similar to the Kamen Rider gap and how things go along there. Lord of the Rings is, again, not only a fantastic example of the kind of practical effects you expect from Tokusatsu, but the appendices for the original trilogy will give you a huge idea about how this stuff is done, bigatures and ways that miniatures in general are used, and just so many good things about how they worked with scale, how they worked to make practical effects bring this world to life. And that is exactly what you expect to see out of Japanese Tokusatsu as well. Now, we're mainly going to talk about the Japanese stuff, of course. But that being said, we could literally talk about different franchises all day. Suffice to say, Toku is about as much of the cultural fabric as Japan as its Western equivalent is over here. And similarly, its impact is hard to miss, even in other media. Just like how you wouldn't be surprised to watch anything and have someone go, so too, are you very likely to see Tokusatsu references in other media. For example, there are anime that are pretty much one-to-one with Tokusatsu. Pluto PI is actually a direct continuation of 2009's Kamen Rider Double. SSS Gridman is so much an animated Toku that you can see how the kaiju costumes are made. Mr. Villain's Day Off, like 2022's Love After World Domination, show into the villain organizations as well as the heroes, and the color-coded teams that they're fighting do have some unmistakable similarities to a certain franchise. Yes, we're getting there. Super Sentai was an inspiration for Sailor Moon, and the mangaka is actually a fan of Super Sentai, which is part of the reason why we got it the way that we did. And speaking of fans, Tokusatsu Gagaga is a manga about the reality of being an adult Toku fan, which got turned into a drama, which is technically also a Tokusatsu. Talk about living your dreams. And I hear people yelling about Steel Samurai in the chat. And yeah, Steel Samurai not only has, Ace Attorney literally does not only have an Ultraman XP in Steel Samurai, but there are also Super Sentai and Godzilla equivalents as well. Something Mighty Muzilla. And yes, Miles Edgeworth is 100% a Toku nerd. For something a little bit more Western, Chroma Squad is a great example, which is based around, it says Power Rangers, and that's because they literally could not get the rights to say based around Super Sentai. But there are endings based around Kamen Rider, Metal Heroes, and I believe Ultraman as well, depending on what the decisions you make in the game. And I'll let the Persona 4 Neo Featherman costumes just talk for themselves. This is just the tip of the iceberg. For example, if you hear lackeys or people acting as lackeys while doing some kind of nefarious task going, that's a Kamen Rider reference right there. And in fact, this happens in Free. And this isn't even getting into the Western side of things. For example, Reptar is very much based on Godzilla. And Hanna-Barbera literally has Godzilla and Ultraman cartoons. And Spider-Man, who we'll actually talk about a little bit more later on, but yes, there was a 1970s Japanese tokusatsu for Spider-Man, and that specific Spider-Man has shown up in some Spider-Man comics, and that's just to name a few things. And it also goes beyond just fiction into real life, because local heroes are a thing, guys. To explain what local heroes are, they're essentially, if you were to take city mascots, which you may have heard of before, mix that with WWE wrestling, and you kind of have local heroes right there. They're generally aligned with places or companies and can be found literally all over Japan. One example, which is in the middle here, is Dentman, who has been blowing up online recently, and he's literally there to promote brushing your teeth. And just like how WWE could not exist if everyone were a face, so too are there heels in the local heroes world. Dentman has a nemesis, Mr. Mutants, who is a living cavity with a piece of wrapped candy for a head. And in the lower right corner, you will see 4 members of the AHK, who are a company of local villains. And their philosophy is literally to be a necessary evil and protect children's smiles, while trying to take over the world, of course. We'll talk more about the other local heroes we see in this frame a little later on, though I will note for those of you with the keen eye, yes, the members of the AHK are with Makun, aka Kamen Rider Decade, because of course they are. That's actually from his YouTube channel. So, on to history. In the same way we wouldn't have Avatar: The Last Airbender if not for Disney, because Disney actually inspired Osamu Tezuka, so too would we not have Power Rangers without King Kong. And to explain this and give a very quick capsule history, I'm going to introduce you to 2 key figures who were involved in making Toku what it is today. So we'll start off with Tsuburaya Eiji, who's considered the father of Tokusatsu and worked on approximately 250 films in his 5 decades in the industry. He helped to bring many innovations to filmmaking, including the iron shooting crane, which is still widely used today. He was actually first inspired to get involved in special effects after watching King Kong. Again, why we wouldn't have one without the other. And he created his own special effects company, the Tsuburaya Special Technology Laboratory, later Tsuburaya Productions, or Tsupro for short, through which he was in charge of special effects for such movies as Godzilla. He also went on to produce the Ultra series, which made him a real household name. And one interesting fact about him is that he converted to Catholicism for his wife, which is why there are sometimes some interesting Christian imagery examples in Ultraman, including no few crucifixions. So from Tsuburaya Eiji, we get many things, but especially the Godzilla series in Ultraman. And then we get Ishinomori Shotaro, who started his career as an assistant to Osamu Tezuka, I believe actually while he was still in high school, and he was working on Astro Boy. His own long-running Cyborg 009, which debuted in 1963, shares some conceptual tropes with the tokusatsu series he'd later create. For instance, it's literally a cyborg hero team. Yeah. He was invited to create the character designs for Kamen Rider in 1971, and later wrote some really trippy manga for it. There are brains in jars. And after its very popular reception, he created several more heroes for the company, some of which lasted a season or two, and some which went on to become great long-running franchises in their own right, especially Super Sentai. So, as I've kind of gone over here, there are a couple major franchises that we're going to touch on. So Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, and Super Sentai. In all of these, I'll give you a quick overview of the franchise, including a bit about its history and creation and where it is now. I'll highlight one or two major tropes and give you a feel of a good couple places where to start. I'll also try to give you a little bit of information about the first show, the most recent entry or entries, and one or two places in between. And two notes here. Number one, your mileage may vary. Things that I am willing to recommend and want to recommend are not necessarily things you will like. And there are going to be some things that I don't mention that you absolutely love. Feel free to put your recs in chat anytime when I'm talking about a franchise, and I'll be happy to bring them up when we're talking about recs. Because there are so many entries in each one of these, and they're all worth something to someone. So let's start with Godzilla. This was created by the team effort of SFX director Tsuburaya, like I said, director Ishido Honda, and producer Tomoyuki Tanaka. The original was inspired by nuclear terror, including the Lucky Dragon 5 and the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And while it grew into a franchise, it has become Godzilla, in particular, has become frequently reinvented and thematically diverse. For example, Godzilla has been the embodiment of nuclear war, a friend to children, a force of nature, the embodiment of wartime enmity, and a literal worldwide ambassador, amongst other things. And there's even a dinosaur genus named after him, the Gojirasaurus, which was found in 1997, or at least named in 1997. And that is neat that you got to meet the voices of Ultraman and the daughter of Godzilla King. That is very cool. So one common theme in Godzilla is the giant Daikaiju battles, including crossovers with other Toho monsters such as Mothra and Rodan, and introducing some others that would become beloved and well-known in their own right, such as King Ghidorah. As to where you can start with Godzilla, again, there's a lot of themes in this. There's a lot of different tropes and ways that this show feels. So any movie, you might want to find one that best suits what the mood you're in for. And you can really do that because most of the Godzilla films don't have a lot of continuity between them, except for one run in the 90s, starting with Biollante. And as we mentioned, Godzilla is the first in the franchise. Destroy All Monsters is a good one if you want to just see as many suits as possible, because they literally took every suit that was still in working order and pitted them all against each other. Shin Godzilla is the first of Anno's Shin movies, so if you're into something a little darker, that's a good place for you. And Godzilla -1 literally came out a couple months ago, so that's another good place for you to look if you want the most recent thing to come out of Godzilla. Godzilla.com, which I've mentioned up here, shows where to stream everything in your country that you can possibly watch. Many of the early films are in the Criterion Collection, and several are on the Roku channel as well. And Shin Godzilla is actually on Crunchyroll, so anime fans, you know where to look. So Godzilla was playing on screen during the con, and it was the first I saw in theater after a long stay in hospital. Such heartfelt memories. That is awesome. Okay, so let's move on to Ultraman Schwatch. So this is the other major series by Tsuburaya Eiji. And Ultraman, the titular one, is actually the second one in the series. Ultra Q was the first in 1966, and Ultraman aired later that year and was the one that introduced the silver hero that we know. The show has taken a few hiatuses over the years, but has been running with approximately one show a year since Ultraman Ginga in 2013. The Reiwa shows have been related to some of their Heisei cousins, such as Ultraman Tiger to Ultraman Trigger, which was very closely related, but especially Ultraman Blazer is more of a spiritual successor to the Heisei show that it's getting some themes from, rather than being directly, we are not doing a new generation one for that. The older series are often a full year long, but these newer ones tend to be closer to 2 cours, so more like 26 episodes to a full 50. And Ultraman beings are actually beings of light. They need a human form to survive on Earth, but this can be either a human host, or they may take on a human form themselves. In either case, there's a time limit to when they can be in their Ultra form while on Earth. And when they are in their Ultraman form, they'll know when they're running out of time because there will be a light on their chest that generally blinks. They also come in 2 different forms, because while they're always a giant silver hero, as you can see on screen, we can have red ones, which are generally fighters, and blue ones, which are generally scientists. Though that being said, they can change their colors sometimes, and if they have different forms. And some only have one form, and that is what they do. And some have multiple power-ups, or just multiple ways that they can be, depending on what's needed at the time. And being an Ultraman is generally a secret identity, which they need to hide from their team. And usually they are part of some team, usually a science team, exploratory team, a military team, or in one glorious case for a third of a show, a teacher. And one similarity between Godzilla and Ultraman is the recurring monsters. And I'm curious if anyone can name all the monsters on this slide. Ultraman uses more of the Monster of the Week style as opposed to, say, Godzilla, which is just whatever monsters are in that particular movie. But unlike Kamen Rider or Super Sentai, which also use Monster of the Week style, in Ultraman, you'll often see the same suits, or at least the same monsters in some form, showing up again and again. And if you think that, costume looks a lot like Godzilla, yeah, there are a couple ones that are pretty much Godzilla suits with a thing or two added. And in fact, at the beginning of Shin Ultraman, they do have a shot that was literally taken from Shin Godzilla as a reference to this. And people get really excited for their favorite monsters to show up. For example, a friend of mine was definitely cheering King Joe, when we were watching an episode in which King Joe was the monster. I'm seeing no takers on what they all are, but someone is excited to learn. So let's go through. We have Jiraiya, King Joe, Zeton, Red King, Ella King, and Gamera. Who would that be indeed? Said friend is in the chat. So where to start with Ultraman? Well, again, you can start with Ultraman, or Ultra Q for that matter. Ultra 7 in 1967 could be an interesting place for any Pokemon fans, because that's literally where the capsule monsters came from. Ultra 7 was the inspiration for Pokeballs, and also means that you can chant 777, 777. Ultraman Mebius is an anniversary series, which touches on previous series. So if you're interested in early Heisei or Showa ones, this could be a good place to start because you can get information about what the previous ones are like. It also has a class reunion for that teacher, Ultraman, that I was talking about, Ultraman 80, My Heart. Shin Ultraman is the second Shin movie by Anno, or third if you include Shin Evangelion. So that's another one that you could keep in mind. Ultraman Blazer is the most recent entry. It just ended and it is available entirely on YouTube, and it was simuldubbed. It also simul-subbed. So you can watch it in either in English or in Japanese, completely free, completely legally on YouTube. And there are several other series on their official YouTube channel as well. And there are also several available on Shout Factory, though the most recent ones you'll only find on YouTube. Oh, I've got notes, Lindy Cosplay Supplies. Oh, good note. There's also a whole lot of Ultraman on Tubi. Ultraman is a lot easier to find than some of the other shows, which is a godsend for those of us who want to watch lots of Toku. So let's move on to Kamen Rider. Kamen Rider was created by Shotaro Ishinomori in 1971 and ran somewhat sporadically until 1989. And there were a couple movies after that, which were technically released in the Heisei era, but are considered still Showa because the differentiating line there is usually Ishinomori's death rather than when the new emperor took the throne. The Heisei era, as we see it, starts in 2000 with Kamen Rider Kuga, and the franchise has been going pretty much solidly since then. The original Kamen Rider Ichigo's actor, Fujioka Hiroshi, did his own stunts, and he may have had a motorcycle accident in which he broke his leg. And that is how secondary riders came to be. Since then, not only did we get Kamen Rider Nigo and the entire idea of having a second rider to work as a foil for the first one, but also a lot of rider actors have not been allowed to do their own stunts, even if they specifically got their motorcycle license, knowing that they were cast on this show. Some notable exceptions have existed, such as Tsuki Minami in Kamen Rider Gaim, and Fujioka Hiroshi. Still, every time he shows up, you're pretty much safe to bet that Kamen Rider Ichigo is doing his own stunts. And this actually carries through to Sosuke Ikematsu, who plays Kamen Rider Ichigo in Shin Kamen Rider, and may have been doing his own stunts, and may have been involved in an accident in which he broke his leg, because history repeats itself. The villains in Kamen Rider are generally secret evil organizations, and there are some long-standing ones that keep popping up over and over again. Shocker is the main one, who are known to have Nazi and Illuminati ties, and are the ones whose henchmen go. Again, if you hear people saying that, probably a Shocker reference. They're also the reason for a lot of the, if you see in a lot of the shows, like Love After World Domination and Mr. Villain's Day Off, I think, I'm trying to remember, but a lot of the lackey costumes really do come from the lackey costumes from Kamen Rider. Shockers had very much these black balaclavas that were designed to look like skulls. And yeah, that shows up a lot. And Kamen Riders themselves are generally bug-themed cyborgs, especially in the Showa era. Later shows have gotten a lot more creative with the themes and also way more toyetic. So instead of just having bugs, we have video games. We have Fruit, written by Urobuchi. We have Cars, which was the one time that it was the secondary rider, not the primary rider, riding a motorcycle. And on and on and on. The current season actually has a trading card theme. And an alchemy theme, but the toys are trading cards. Speaking of which, a rider is nothing without their rider belt or their transformation pose, and especially in recent years, all of the playsets and toys that can be used to give them power-ups. Kamen Riders are the ones that are going to shout Henshin, and quite often have a catchphrase that they'll use around it as part of their transformation as well. Shall we begin the experiment? They also have different tools, as I said, that let them unlock different forms, such as Gaia memories or lock seeds. And sometimes there's just one of them that they can use at a time, sometimes multiple. Kamen Rider Double with Gaia memories requires 2. Kamen Rider Forze in the bottom there actually needs 4. Or can have up to 4, 1 for each arm and 1 for each leg. This is quite a divergence from the original Kamen Rider that literally his belt was built into him and he had to go really fast because it was wind powered and it was going fast enough that velocity going through him that would power his transformation. So again, you can see really when things got more toyetic, when we started to get, instead of this one thing, here's 20, please buy all of them. So where to start with Kamen Rider? Well, Kamen Rider's first series, Kamen Rider, is almost 100 episodes long, but it is a great place to start. Just be prepared to get in for the long haul. And again, as I mentioned before, there's some really trippy manga if you want to continue on and see what Ishinomori would have written if not, or created, if not confined to what's easily possible within a live-action show. And I will note there are There are 2 anniversary series that I could mention, and I will mention very briefly Kamen Rider Decade and Kamen Rider Zeo. But Kamen Rider Decade is very divisive. Some people absolutely love that show. Some people absolutely hate it. And there are good reasons for both. A lot of people who love it consider it lovable trash. And every world that they visit in that one is actually an alternate universe of one of the previous Heisei shows. Kamen Rider Zeo is a lot more real to what the shows are like for all of the Heisei shows, but also is very much Kamen Rider Decade Season 2. So you need to know one to know the other. So very Marmite shows, if you understand that reference. So you could love it, you could hate it, but it very much depends on you and your own personal interests. That said, Kamen Rider Double is the show that comes after Kamen Rider Decade. It's the show that Futopi is based on. So if you've watched Futopi and want a place to get into Kamen Rider or Tokusatsu in general, Kamen Rider Double is a great place to start. See what happened. See what Philip looks like when he doesn't have green hair. And also, Tokusatsu, who I've mentioned in the slide a little bit, is announcing a new Kamen Rider series that's going to be released on Valentine's Day, so in a couple days from now. And based on the clues that they've given, we think it might be Kamen Rider Double, so that might be a good place to start. Next in the order, chronological, would be O's, which I'm hearing yelled out, so yeah, skip them all and go straight to O's. O's is good show as well, and actually written by the same person who wrote Tokyuger. And that one, again, you have 3 medals that need to be used at a time, and also a very, very good ship in the primary rider, and not actually the secondary rider, but a monster that originally was supposed to be the big bad of O's until he became a friend of children who sent in some of their toys to help try and fix him. And they were like, oh no, we have to make him good now. That said, yeah, there was a recent movie and it did the opposite of fixing the ending. The ending is very bittersweet. It's not a bad ending, but it's very bittersweet. There was a recent 10 Years After movie and it did the opposite of fixing the ending. So I'll just give you that warning and leave in any other spoilers for you to figure out on your own. Kamen Rider 01 is the first Reiwa series, and it is actually entirely available on Tokusatsu. You can stream it right now. So if you want to see what recent Toku is like, or recent Kamen Rider is like, 01 is fully available for you to get into. And sorry, it's about cyborgs. So you have helper robots, and you have helper androids, and you have not cyborgs so much as androids. You have helper androids, and you have evil androids. And yeah, it's a very interesting show. Shin Kamen Rider, of course, has come out not too long ago as well. So if you're into the Shin series, that's a great place to watch. And the current Kamen Rider show is Kamen Rider Gotchard, which, as I mentioned, is alchemy and school and trading cards. So if that sounds like your kind of thing and you want to get into watching it weekly, Kamen Rider Gotchard is currently airing. And O's, I'm getting the comment, they also couldn't make him bad because he has too much on-screen chemistry with the main character. It's true. Ankh and Eiji are very, very, very shippable. And also Ankh's actor still looks exactly like that, and it's wonderful. He's done a lot of stage work since, and a couple movies. There's actually one movie he was in with a man who has played 2 different Kamen Riders, called Stardust Brothers. That was the name of the movie that they both were in together, and it was really amusing, just going, oh hey, that's Kazumin and Ankh. Huh. So yes, that's a couple different Kamen Rider shows, and you can check out pretty much everything that anything that Shout Factory has released. They also have streaming for free, so you can get a physical copy, so you can have it no matter what, but you can also stream it completely free online. And again, Kamen Rider 01 is there. they don't have a ton of Kamen Riders, but the ones that they have are really good ones. One other one that's not on the slide that I know was yelled at me when I was rehearsing this with my friends was Kamen Rider Kuga, which is the first show that started the Heisei and onward run of Kamen Rider, and it is available on Tokusatsu as well. One note on that one that I will say, it is very good. It is very, very good. A lot of people love it. It also is very dark, and the evil organization is literally doing a killing game. So if you are a little squeamish and don't like seeing dead bodies everywhere, it may not be for you. I had to stop partway through just because I was like, this is a little much for me. But a lot of people absolutely adore it. And yes, this is still a kid's show. Death is very much a thing that you can get. So, from Kamen Rider, we move on to Super Sentai. And I'll be honest, this is my favorite of the 4 major franchises. So, it is the most chronologically recent to begin, but also, I'd like to think that I saved the best for last. Tokusatsu is where you found it. Awesome. So Super Sentai was created by Ishinomori in 1976. The first show was Secret Sentai Go Ranger. Though this and the second show, Jacker, were not considered Super Sentai at first. I'm curious, does anyone know what makes Super Sentai super? Because there is something involved in Super Sentai that makes it super. And I will say these shows are now considered Super Sentai. They made it a bit more, they added them back in 1994 in order to keep things easy for anniversaries. And so they didn't have to go, well, is it this one or is it this one? Yes, we have an answer there. That is correct. Spider-Man is actually responsible for Super Sentai being super. Specifically, Spider-Man introduced giant mecha battles. And from Jacker, the third show on, sorry, not Jacker, from Battle Fever J, the third show on, there's always been giant in almost every episode of Super Sentai. They've actually been breaking this a little recently, and it's been great because you just see us all shocked at each other and going, oh, that episode wasn't super. But yes, Spider-Man, which appeared in the one gap that we've ever had in the Super Sentai run, which was between Jacker and Battle Fever J. That is when we got Mecha. Battle Fever J was actually also supposed to be based on Marvel. It's kind of supposed to be a Japanese Captain America. And I believe they might have actually originally been trying to get Captain America in it a bit more. But yeah, Battle Fever J ended up where it did. And also gave us the real notion that, yeah, maybe we shouldn't put wigs on our helmets because Miss America is a thing. While Kamen Rider often has 2-episode arcs, Super Sentai, which is generally aimed for a younger audience, will often have more of an episodic feel. So although there is a through continuity running through the shows, generally you can hop into every episode and not feel like you've missed too much and not feel like you need to remember too much about what happened, except for, again, there might be a new power-up, might be something like that, but except for a couple episodes at the beginning and a couple episodes at the end, it's much more one at a time with some through plot, rather than these are 2 episodes and it's very much part 1 and part 2. That said, the current show, King Oger, very much an exception to this. Start King Oger at the beginning. Trust me. And of course, from Super Sentai, it's been brought over to the West a bit more than a lot of the other ones have, especially through the iconic and memorable USA Dynaman dub. And also a little known show that started in 1993 called Power Rangers. Who is she? But yeah, again, this is the most consistent show we've ever had, starting with only one break and going right through from Battle Fever J in the 70s to the present day. And Super Sentai is known for having so many Rangers. You always have a colorful team, generally odd-numbered at base, often 3 or 5, but in one particular case, Q Ranger, we actually had a nine Ranger team, as the name suggested. That said, not only are they generally color coded for our convenience out of character as well as in character, out of suit as well as in suit, as you can see with the Kira Majors over here, but also there are sixth Rangers. And these sixth Rangers, again, are not always actually sixth. At the bottom, you can see pretty much every sixth Ranger from Gokaiger earlier. And in Q Ranger again, the sixth Ranger was actually, I believe, the 11th or 12th to show up in the show. There are also extra Rangers. These are Rangers that are not really filling the role of the sixth Ranger. The sixth Ranger also generally acts as a foil to either the Red Ranger or to the entire team and brings a new perspective. For example, with Gokaiger, Guy is a human with a team of space pirates. So Guy brings all of the knowledge of the Earth's heroes, all of the Super Sentai, which the Gokaigers don't really have. And also a whole lot of enthusiasm, which the Gokaigers have some of, but certainly not to the extent of Guy. Meanwhile, in Kyoryuger, we have 4 different extra rangers, and these extra rangers, in all the shows, tend to be more adult than the rest of the team, or more kiddie than the rest of the team, or take on another role that, again, doesn't really mesh with the rest of the team. For example, Maji Mother in Maji Rangers is literally the main team's mother, so doesn't really fit in with the rest of them. In Key Ranger, the extra rangers would be Ryu Commander, who, as the name suggests, was literally the commander of the rest of the team, and also is a little bit older than them. And Kotaro, who is a kid. And in Kyoryuger, we literally have half of them being spirits at one point or another, or an adult who passes on his power, or a very older adult who passes on his power to his granddaughter, I believe, daughter or granddaughter. But again, just outside of the general team dynamic. When I was really small, my dad brought me to see Ultraman in the 70s while it was still in theaters. There was no anime to speak of back then, so I was like, what is happening? What is happening is a good description of a lot of tokusatsu. Also, probably a lot of anime when you're first getting into it. My first anime experience, I believe, was my cousin watching Ranma 1/2, which was certainly a good show to start out with, but also a bit of an interesting one as to what is happening. So I would agree with you there. As for where to start, got some examples here. I will say, if you have a favorite Power Ranger series, feel free to start with its Sentai equivalent. That said, they're thematically not the same, but you might be able to just enjoy a different take on what they could do with the same footage. You also might be surprised with how similar they are. For example, Power Rangers Samurai is actually one of the closest one-to-one with Shinkenger, which, of all the themes, you would think Shinkenger to Power Rangers Samurai, but there are also some that are entirely different, especially when Saban had already gone, okay, we're doing this theme. And then the show comes out and it's an entirely different theme. And we've got some Time Force votes going here. That being said, I will say, Super Mega Force is what it is. And I am angry about Super Mega Force being what it is. But please, Gokaiger. Gokaiger is amazing. They squandered the gift of space pirates. Please watch Gokaiger. It is also an anniversary series, which means that it is a great place to start because you get to see little hints of all the 34 shows before it. And again, get an idea of what they are all like. So, especially because Gokaiger takes on the mood of the show that it's going, you can go from something that's really serious, like finding out that someone who's a cyborg can never become human again, to Power Ranger, whose special ability is literally their dumb pose, and everywhere in between. Go Ranger again. First show, just be aware, it's another two-year long one with episodes every week, so be in there for the long haul. Ranger is, of course, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, so if you got into it with Mighty Morphin, start with Ranger. It's available on Shout Factory. The current show, which is just about to wrap up, is King Oger, and it is literally one of the best one of the best Super Sentai, to be certain, that we have seen in ages. It is wonderful. So if you are ready to just go through an entire series, binge something that's really, really good, and a lot more through written than most Super Sentai is, please watch King Oger. It is amazing. And because this is just wrapping up, we are learning more and more about the show that is starting in March, which is Boon Boonja. So if you just want to start with something new and get right on the bandwagon watching live as things come out, the beginning of March is a great place to begin because we've got a brand new show. It's probably going to be a lot more back to the basics of what Super Sentai is. We know it's going to be car themed. We know that there are some previous shows that are going to show up. They've announced Tokuger's going to be appearing. Again, it's a good time to get into the weekly watches if that's something that you're interested in. Kyoryuger, their superpower was dancing. It was super fun. Yes, coming Boon. Boon Boonja has literally been saying on their ads that they are coming Boon. And Kyoryuger actually also shows up in King Oger. So if you like the Kyoryugers and want to see them a bit more, again, King Oger exists. It is wonderful. Watch it. And let's move on to a couple other things. So here's probably the easiest entry point that I can point anyone to with Tokusatsu. And that is, if you like Sailor Moon, watch Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon. The writer for this show is Kobayashi Yasuko, who is honestly one of my favorite Tokusatsu writers, and has written such things as Tokuger and Kamen Rider O's, which was mentioned as someone's favorite a little earlier. I will note that her style is a little dark, but she is very good at balancing darkness with humor, especially when writing for younger audiences. If you want to see her go really dark and unleashed, though, Kamen Rider Amazons, which is different from Kamen Rider Amazon. One is pretty early Kamen Rider from the Showa era, and one is pretty recent Amazon Prime Kamen Rider. But yes, she wrote that as well. Among other things, it's unique in the handling of Luna, who exists both as a stuffed animal and a young girl in the series. We actually don't have Sailor Chibi Moon show up, and instead we get Sailor Luna. I'm seeing some people go, yes, the live action of Sailor Moon was super underrated and is very good and possibly even your favorite of Sailor Moon productions. It is incredible, yes. So again, if you just want a place that you're already familiar with to get started in Tokusatsu, Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon absolutely qualifies. Another one, which is a personal favorite of mine, is Dogengers, which literally translates as something like Yalgers, and it follows the real life. It follows the adventures of the real life local heroes of Fukuoka. Though that said, their tagline is, "The heroes are real, the stories are not." So it's showing these made up stories about these real life heroes as they live their lives, engage in hijinks, and fight against the AHK. And each season actually introduced a couple new local heroes to the show. Some of them are ones that already existed in real life. For example, Bincho Fire didn't show up until season 2 or 3, but Bincho Fire exists in real life. But Rookie and Mako, to give 2 examples, are ones that were designed for the show, but have since the show appeared in real life as well. So this show is also generating more local heroes as well as promoting the ones that already existed. My personal favorites are the first and third seasons. The first season introduces you to some of the local heroes around and spend some time with each of them. For example, there's Kitakuman, who hates fighting or doing much of anything except taking food pics. He is trash, and we all love him. Foko Kadaba, who got a new suit design for the show and is coming to grips with his new self. And actually, you get him kind of looking at his old self and seeing how he's changed. Yamashiron, who is a combination of 3 other heroes, Redron, Aoidon, and Daidaidon, and is pretty much dealing with the teamwork that comes with being three entities in one body. Those three are actually associated with a gas company. Yamashiron, I believe, is with a textile company. Kitakuman is literally for Kitakyushu. And El Brave, who is short and scrappy and may or may not have a height complex, which he battles through with a giant plushie who uses a guy in all black as his body. Yes, that is one of the villains. And we do get to know several members of the AHK as well. Yes, Edward Elric syndrome pretty much is exactly a good way to explain El Brave, except he's much kind of, if Edward Elric were a luchador, you'd be getting close to El Brave. And yes, we get to know several members of the AHK as well, including their leader, Yabai Kamen, their spokesperson, Shabare Man, literally Talkie Man, and more. And then the third season of Dogengers is Dogengers High School, which involves a very ordinary girl finding out that she's also a superhero. And I will say, when this show airs, the episodes are freely available on YouTube for a week. And this is available through the AHK's YouTube channel, of all things, which again, I've listed here. And the AHK is one of the driving forces behind Dogengers and gives a lot of publicity to the heroes because, again, they're literally the heels. Yes, if Edward Elric was a luchador's new ska band's album, amazing. AHK's website is, YouTube is also wonderful because they show behind the scenes content. They have some of the live shows because local heroes do a lot of live shows where they're just fighting and meeting their fans. And they also show some little moments of what it's like in the AHK headquarters, which are all very, very fun to watch as well. Now, I have one more real entry point to share with you guys as to how to get into Tokusatsu. And that is the Toku to BL pipeline. And I know Boys Love has already come up once today, so hey guys. Toei is very aware that their secondary audience is the mothers of the kids who make up their primary audience. And they definitely cast a lot of pretty boys in their shows to help with this. In fact, Kamen Rider Build, who I've built this slide around, was airing when they changed the times of both Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, and they definitely had Banjo Ryuga shirtless in the episodes leading up to them. And it was literally just like, hey moms, remember that the show is changing. If you remember the show is changing, you might be able to see more of the shirtless guy. Many of the guys who are in this have won or at least participated in the Junon Superboy contest, which is essentially a nationwide Bishonen search. And yeah, so since there's a lot of pretty boys involved in Tokusatsu, yeah, there's also a lot of pretty boys in BL because that's kind of what it's about. For example, again, Zettai BL has the primary writer for Kamen Rider Build. Fairy Magic stars the secondary writer of Kamen Rider Build. An old-fashioned Cupcake stars the tertiary writer, Kamen Rider Build. And we're waiting for the fourth guy to get involved in something as well, let's be real here. So yeah, if you enjoyed any BL, then no, really, look up if your favorite character has been involved in Tokusatsu. Or if you want to see your favorite Tokusatsu actor do other things, you might want to see if they've been involved in any BL as well. This even goes for Kamen Rider Black Sun, because before appearing in Black Sun, one of the stars was in What Did You Eat Yesterday, along with Elaine from Kamen Rider Ghost. Yeah. And incidentally, the other half of the Toku boys often come from the stage, so if you're a fan of Tenny Muse, there's probably a Toku for you. So to wrap up, and to give you, again, a couple more examples of what's out there, whether you want to explore the unofficial, like Kampai Senshi After 5, or binge retro Toku on Toei's official YouTube, where they have a lot of shows that are not part of these major franchises available to watch in their entirety for free. Whether you want to empower young girls with Girls Heroine series, which actually just ended recently, or bring Bishonen obsession to its natural conclusion with the Johnny's Fueled high school heroes, which also involved a trans ranger, whether you want to cheer on a disabled hero in Parahero Gundin, which stars Kamen Rider Zio's actor, or watch Metal Heroes go beyond their limits in the Metal Heroes series. There literally is something in Toku for everyone. And yes, as Kira has said, there's a Toku for that. So sorry for stealing your line, Dan, but yes, there is a Toku for that. So thank you very much, everyone. And it's been wonderful to talk Toku with you. And I will put the links to all these places where you can stream Tokusatsu in the panel discussion room after we end. So if you want to check stuff out, it'll be really easy to just open those links and lose a couple hundred hours. Thank you again.